Okay, hi everybody. Sorry for joining just a couple minutes late. I had to check my internet connection. So we are here with another fasting work girl chat. And in a second, we're going to have Timothy join us, and then we will start our live chat. Tonight, I'm going to have Timothy Gay joining us. And he is also known on Instagram as The Infinite Transition. And so we're going to be discussing some mental health aspects and just motivational aspects behind the weight loss journey. So he's going to join in just a second. There he is. Saw he just joined. And then I'm going to send him an invitation. And then we'll get started.
Hello.
Hi. All right. Can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So, all right. Great to have you tonight, Timothy.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Ganhart. It is a pleasure to be here.
No problem. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to give our lovely disclaimer, and then I'm going to read your bio, and then we'll jump right into it. So
sounds fantastic.
All right. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Fasting Work Girl chat. Just before we begin, I just want to give our lovely disclaimer, and basically it's that neither myself nor Timothy are providing personalized medical advice. If you hear something that you find of interest or think that could be beneficial to you, we suggest discussing that with your healthcare provider. And seeing if that applies to your personal situation. All right, so I'm going to read a bio on Timothy. So Timothy Gay is here with us tonight. He's also known on Instagram as The Infinite Transition, and then his website is also The Infinite Transition as well, .com. And Timothy Gay is a certified theta healing practitioner, soul liberation life coach, and founder of The Infinite Transition. His mission is to help each person unlock their infinite power within themselves so that they can own their truth, allowing them to impact the world around them through their gifts and passions. Timothy's journey began in 2013 after being introduced to theta healing by a friend. Through a couple of short sessions, theta healing helped him heal from suicidal depression, which he had been dealing with for over 20 years. Shortly after that, he became a certified theta healing practitioner and used it to help others heal from traumas like his and beyond. Timothy is a champion of self-care, which he believes is a foundation for well-being. He is currently authoring a book on self-care, which is due to be released later this year. So with that, I want to say welcome, Timothy, and glad to have you tonight.
Oh, happy to be here. Thank you very much.
Well, why don't you start off with just explaining a little bit more about yourself, what you do, what your area of focus is?
Absolutely. We'd love to. So thank you. Hello. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for this evening. My area of expertise, I am a theta healing practitioner, and I've been a practitioner of theta healing since 2013, June of 2013. So I will be in practice as officially 6 years as of soon to be next month. So the theta healing technique is a technique that allows us to connect with God, source, universe, all that is, whatever word and name that you give it. And we do that utilizing a series of meditation, guided imagery, focused thought, focused prayer, and using that to connect to our own internal body systems. And by doing that, it allows us to connect to our subconscious mind and connect to things at a cellular DNA level. And by doing that, what we can do is we can remove any subconscious blocks and beliefs that we may have that are running us unknowingly. And any of those beliefs that we have holding us back from, say, physical health to things such as personal relationships, career and business, whatever the case may be. And by removing those blocks, it allows us, we utilize within the theta healing technique, a process that allows us to remove those subconscious beliefs and subconscious beliefs and repattern them using that same process, so that any of those things that were running us before no longer exist. And in place, we have something that is now supportive and empowering to help us to move toward the things that we look to achieve in life.
Okay, no, I think that's really important. And things that, as we kind of talk about weight loss, or what I'll see a lot, is that people tend to look at weight and assume that as soon as they reach a certain goal weight, everything will be better. So all the insecurities that they had before, whatever you were suffering with, that weight loss is automatically the cure. And then I think that sometimes people are disappointed when they lose weight and still find that they suffer from insecurities. How does one kind of set themselves in the right mind frame to begin a weight loss journey per se, realizing that it's not necessarily going to be, a quick process, that it's going to take time? How does one kind of get themselves mentally ready for that and prepared for some of the challenges that may lie ahead with that?
Well, that's a fantastic question. And so I want to start with a couple of things. First off, we're not solely just on a weight loss journey, but we're on a journey to obtain optimal health. Mm-hmm. And losing weight is a part of that. Weight is ultimately irrelevant. And I know that sounds like a very bold statement mm-hmm. for a lot of people, but you really have to understand that the goal is not necessarily to lose weight. The goal is to become optimally healthy, and losing weight is only a part of that journey. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to that, I think the first thing that we have to understand is that when it comes to becoming optimally healthy, that this is a process, and that the process is something that you have to understand that you didn't get to this point overnight. Mm-hmm. You got to this point over a period of years. And because you got to that point over a period of years, it's going to take some time to undo that as well. The good news is becoming optimally healthy is actually easier than putting on the weight that that you gained over the years. Mm-hmm. And really utilizing that, you can create a series of really create a roadmap in order to get you to that point of become optimally healthy. So getting yourself in the mental frame of mind is also getting you to understand that, number one, your journey is completely independent from everyone else's journey. We see on social media people who have lost so much weight, they're fit, they're ripped, they look really good. And they're amazing. But at the same time, that's their journey and that's their body and that's how things worked for them. And so the other thing that we have to, so we spent a lot of time when it comes to losing weight and become optimally healthy, that people still don't feel good about themselves because they're so busy comparing themselves to everyone else. And in that comparison space, we don't even know what it's like to appreciate the things that we have and love what we have and be grateful for what we've been able to achieve in our journeys to get to where we are. And understand that we're not using people as the goal or the target, but solely for inspiration, and that's it.
Right, because I think what happens, while social media is great and it's allowed me to connect with a lot of different physicians interested in lifestyle medicine and treating people as a whole, and it's nice to be a part of that community, but social media can also kind of be a trap if you're trying to compare what someone else can do to where you are at in your journey. So if you're just starting your health and fitness and wellness journey, you may not be able to run 3 miles, 1 mile, a half a mile. Walking may be what you need to do. And there's nothing wrong with walking. That's fine. But I think sometimes what will come across people's feeds, you'll see different people flipping tires, doing all sorts of things, which I also agree is amazing. But we have to look at it that you don't have to do that in order to lose your weight or achieve your optimal health. And so I think sometimes the comparison aspect really does hold us back mentally when we're trying to do a physical health journey. There was a question early that asked about how does mental health play in the role in weight loss? And I think also a flip side to that question, or to rephrase it in a different way, is that we also have to look at the role that mental health is played in the weight gain. Because sometimes the weight gain is a symptom of something else. And I think it's very easy for people to point fingers and say, well, you're just overweight because you ate too much. Well, it's like, okay, no, not necessarily. Like, so what is it about the eating too much? Like, what led to that? And who defines what's too much? I mean, maybe they didn't eat much at all, but it was the wrong foods for their body type that they were eating, that then led to that. But even so, I think looking at mental health, I guess, how does one work at or towards identifying what could be some of their root causes mentally, which led to the symptom or the manifestation of obesity, that even if you lose the weight, could still be there or be an issue for you?
Absolutely. And I think, and I'm really happy that this person asked this question. And I'm glad that you also reframed the question as well and looked at it the other way, because we don't often look at something. So we have to first understand when it comes to being overweight, whether it be obesity or general weight gain, unhealthy, whatever that case may look like, we also have to understand that we often treat the symptoms. So the weight is the symptom. The unhealthy eating is the symptom. We never talk about what is the root cause as to why someone even got to that point or even started to get to that point. So, for example, what role does mental health play in weight? All of it. And I'm going to give you a really what you may seem as an extreme example, because there was a lot of my work is around trauma release and looking at particularly mental and emotional trauma and what led to certain belief patterns that people created within themselves. So there was a couple of videos that I've watched that talk about trauma, in particular with weight. And this is a great example because I started doing some work with someone who was losing a bunch of weight. And one day something happened and it triggered them and they gained all of that weight back. And they were like, well, what happened? And someone said, well, someone hit it. You wouldn't believe what happened the other day. Someone hit on me. And they were like, well, why would that get you to stop doing all the stuff that they were doing? And it's like, well, so he started going back and he was like, well, when was the first time in your life that you started putting on all this weight? He said, when I was about 9 years old. And what was going on around that time? Well, that was about the time that my father raped me. And for her, overweight was overlooked. And that's what she wanted to be. Now, that may seem like an extreme example, but unfortunately, it's not as extreme as you may think. It's much more common as you may think. I've worked with a fair number of people who have been molested, and weight was always one of their issues. So you have to look at things. So when it talks about mental health being a key factor in weight, you have to look at what are you using that weight for? I also know, from a person who is local in my area who was raped at gunpoint at the age of 22 while they were overseas. And if you look at something like that, it's like, and so what happened? They've been overweight 42 years later. It still bothers them. So now, like I said, extreme example, yes. Uncommon example, unfortunately, no. Because this stuff happens every day. So if you use weight as a form of protection, you have to start looking at what is underneath the underneath. So, I don't I didn't expect it to go directly into this trauma talk right away, but it is important to talk about, especially when it comes to weight, because it's not just food. It's not just lack of exercise. It's part of it. Mm-hmm. Absolutely it is. And you can't just sit here and ignore those things, but you also can't sit here and ignore the other sides of things as well. Because if you start ignoring the other triggers and factors that play directly into that, then you will never get a full picture of stuff. That's why health is not just physical. It is physical, it is mental, it is emotional, and it is spiritual. And if any of those levels are off, you're never going to get a full picture of optimal health.
Right. And so whether you're addressing what your triggers are for different things, or especially looking at things like self-confidence, I think it's very dangerous to say that if for some reason you've had depression or insecurities or what have you as an issue, and you think all of a sudden you'll be fine if you just could look like X, Y, and Z, and then you get to X, Y, and Z and you're still not happy, that also sets up a dangerous yo-yo. And to piggyback on that, another person, this looks like it's Dion Marie Lofton, just had a comment, but I think this goes along with it. She said she's lost 50 pounds since January, but she also in the process did lose what she described as self-hatred. She also suffered from epilepsy, and she hated the fact that she had epilepsy, but she found that exercise and eating right actually helped her mentally. And I think we also underestimate the role of how your food and nutrition can play into how you feel mentally and your well-being. So there's a book that I recommend people read to when they're looking at different things to eat, and they're kind of like, well, this or that or other. And again, you know, one diet doesn't work for all. So you can't just say, if you do this diet, you'll be fine. And that's because our bodies are very diverse, and we have diverse ecosystems within our gut microbiome, and et cetera. And no two gut microbiomes are alike, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But there's a book called The Anti-Anxiety Diet, which is written by Allie Miller, I believe is her last name. She's a registered dietitian by trade, but she talks about the role of excess processed sugar and some of these things that, you know, we just didn't have access to 100 years ago. And how manipulating your diet can also help your mental well-being. And conversely, it just so happens a lot of those same tips are also going to promote weight loss as well. So, I mean, all of that's connected, especially when you're looking at stress and things like that. Another question for you from the person who asked about the mental health weight loss connection, asked, but is it unrealistic to think you can have all those firing together? Just feel like something will always be off. So I don't know if you mean, like, I guess maybe I'll just have to try to paraphrase or think, like, I don't know if he means, do you think it's unrealistic to think that some, I don't know, mental utopia awaits where your physical health really will be in line with your emotional health? You know, can all of that always be together? I mean, I'll let you answer. My personal opinion is that, well, nobody is like 100% awesome 100% of the time. I think it's getting to a state where when life throws you something, it no longer sends you into a spiral. And you're like, okay, yeah, today was bad, but guess what? You know, Monday sucked, but I got you Tuesday. You know, I'm coming for you, or whatever. It's like that ability to bounce back. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah. So my first question is unrealistic compared to what? You know, what are you comparing this to? Are you expecting everything to be in this balance 100% of the time? Because the next comment right after that is sometimes it's all about them being harmonious. And that's the key. We go through seasons in life. And your season is not always going to have all of them being working 100%, but having them being optimal and having one being able to, or one or two being able to carry the others that are kind of slumping down, that's more or less the goal. There is no utopian where everything is going to be perfect. If you're looking for perfection, you're going for the wrong thing. Even when it comes to your optimal health journey, there is no such thing as perfection. So don't go after the perfection, go after the harmony. Understand that you're going to go through seasons and work through those seasons, because one day your physical health may be up, but your spiritual health is down, or your mental side is down. And you know, something that a lot of people also understand is when you start, your physical body starts changing, stuff comes up. Things come up because now your body is releasing, you're detoxing, your brain is working in a format and fashion it hasn't worked in years. So of course stuff is going to come up. That's when you have to start nurturing yourself. I think one of the things that people misunderstanding about self-care is that it's preventative care. It is nurturing yourself before you get to a point where you become incapacitated due to health issues. And so you have to start nurturing yourself along the process. And that's the whole idea about those 4 pillars of health, being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual, is yes, it'd be ideal if all of them were full at full capacity and overflowing in capacity. Actually, that'd be ultimate and ideal, but they're not always going to be. But if they can be in harmony with each other, that's much more important than having them be just one up and everything else being down.
Well, and the other thing too that I find is kind of, I think we throw around the phrase a lot, but I don't know that people really have a grasp on what self-care is. Because like people will say, okay, so is self-care, does that mean I go get a facial every week? You know, and so now that's my self-care because my skin's glowing. Or is self-care meditation and affirmations and speaking lovingly to myself? Like what is actually, and I know it's going to look at different things for different people, but someone who currently really doesn't even do anything for themselves. Just kind of like they get up, they go to work, they have all these demands, they have all these stressors, they're, stressed. They may also, as a result, their health is now not great. They are putting on pounds and all these different things are kind of spiraling. What would kind of be how does someone actually approach that concept of self-care?
Oh, that's a fantastic question. So I think the first thing we have to understand is when we talk about self-care, the idea of loving yourself and nurturing yourself is, once again, going back to optimal health, a process. And even to basically get people to understand the basics of self-care is it really is making sure you're making yourself a priority and giving to yourself. Now, when it comes to self-care, one of the reasons I'm authoring this book is because the idea of self-care just being a facial or going to the nail salon or getting your hair done is very limiting, because you're talking about a one-time event, an event that you go and do this one thing and, every 2 weeks I get my hair done. Every 2 weeks I go and get my nails done. Well, what the heck's going on those other 13 days?
Right.
And this is the problem when we talk about self-care, is you're looking at it in this extremely limiting and frankly, very uninspiring fashion. So, if all you're doing, people are like, well, I give myself a present and I go out to a spa and have a spa day once a year. Well, the other 364 days of the year, what's going on? Are you not taking care of yourself? So what we have to understand is no different than an optimal health journey where we're looking to lose weight and change our bodies and change our lives. Self-care is the same thing. We are nurturing ourselves and giving ourselves the care that we need before we get to a point where our bodies need extreme care and we need recovery care. And because sometimes it's harder to recover than it is to prevent.
Right. And the thing is too, like you mentioned, it's something that hopefully you can incorporate every day. And it doesn't mean that it is something elaborate or anything that you have to spend money on. Because again, if that can add a whole nother stressor, right? So in terms of, I don't know if you use this, I'm going to assume that you probably use some of this in your practice, but in terms of affirmations, I think a lot of people find affirmations to themselves or meditating or, whatever have you, journaling, whatnot. I think people kind of look at that and think, oh, that's silly. I don't need to do that. But I would say those are very probably effective ways and free ways in which you could incorporate self-care into your everyday routine without it being extremely time consuming, since we all feel like we don't have enough time, those are things that people could do. And that's whether it's stress on your job, stress in your weight loss journey, stress wherever that comes from, because stress in itself is counterproductive for health.
Absolutely. So I want to touch on first the whole stressor part of things. Stress, let's touch back on one of the things about what stress does to the body. Overproducing cortisol, overproducing adrenaline. So people's adrenal glands are always shot. Of course, cortisol makes you age faster. It actually makes you hold on and retain and sometimes gain weight. It makes you look older. Right. So the more stress you have, oftentimes the older people look. Take a look at the people who are always stressed out. Man, they look a lot older than they actually are. Mm-hmm. And it's incredible how they do it. So you're always looking at releasing as much stress reduction as possible. I think if there's anything that you can do for optimal health and even your mental health is reduce as much stress. So sometimes that might mean disengaging from activities. Mm-hmm. And like, if you're on boards for stuff, like I keep busy so I don't have to look at stuff. Well, that's why you have problems. It's probably it's time to deactivate. It's time to disengage from a lot of things. So sometimes it means dumping things from your life. One of the comments I'm getting is journaling is so powerful. Absolutely it is. Journaling is one of my tools that I use in my practice. It is something that I actually coach people to use. And soul sensor journaling in particular, because you're just dumping your mind, just getting stuff out so that it doesn't sit. And writing is one of the most amazing things that you can do, because you actually are activating what they call EMDR therapy, which is, in one format, basically activating rapid eye movement for stress relief, for stress and trauma release. And journaling is one of those things that helps do that. So you're writing from left to right and you're actively activating EMDR therapy. So you're basically healing yourself without having to go and see anyone, which is one of the coolest things ever. Mm-hmm. And then just utilizing other tools that, within that same space. One of my self-care tools is, on the subject is, unplug and disconnect. So, we live in a world where we're so overstimulated. So taking time, not just taking time away from things like social media, but literally turning everything off, turning off all your screens, getting out of your house and getting yourself into nature, completely isolating yourself if you have to, really just getting away from as much stuff, unplug from everything. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. So that's one of the things I would definitely recommend.
And then someone said, this will probably be time for our last question, but the Connection College said, discuss the impact of grief on weight gain and the ability to lose weight.
Ooh, that is a great one. I'm looking at that one too. I'm like, man, the impact of grief on weight gain. So you have to think about it. Grief being a form of stress or the stress response. So, one of my friends talks about that it's not necessarily stress, but it is a response, so a perceived threat. So grief is not a perceived threat. Grief is actually a response to something that is truly going on. So once again, you're activating the stress response. The impact on grief is always going to put you in this space of consistent stress. And its ability to lose weight, that's one of those things where, I'm not sure if it's particularly related to things like a bereavement or for, the loss of a friend or whatever the case may be. But that is this once again goes back to the fact that grief can be the cause of a trauma. So we have to start looking at what is the root cause of the issue. Once again, your work, my work, we go to root causes of things, because if you're going for surface, like, that's not going to do anything. If you have grief, it's like, okay, great, I have grief. Well, why do you have grief? What is the grief in response to? What is going on? What is underneath the underneath? Right. What's at the core of this problem? Because I can sit here and say, okay, your grief is gone. Well, now what? So even before we can address, is the grief, going to make is getting rid of the grief going to make you lose weight? Maybe. It might. But at the same time, is the grief the reason why you're not losing weight either? So we have to start looking at what's the cause? And if the grief is the thing that's holding you back from losing weight, what's the payoff?
Right.
So we got to start looking at, once again, we got to start looking at the whole person, not just the issue.
Right.
So same thing, like, for example, let's go back to the example I used early in the live, and I know we got limited time, so I'll make this as quick as I possibly can. The person who had been raped or molested who can't lose weight, the payoff of keeping that weight on, overweight is overlooked. So is there a payoff to being overweight? You bet your ass there is.
Right. In that sense, right. And so that's, I think, the big thing, and just other things which we didn't have a chance to touch on too, but for people kind of just to take home and think about as they are on their different health journeys. I think it's important for you to figure out, why are you on this journey? So I don't think, obviously everyone's different and things like that. And maybe if you don't have a significant amount of weight to lose, you might really just need to lose 5 pounds to get into a pair of jeans. And it's as simple as that. And there's nothing deeper than that. And that's fine, because everything doesn't have to be deep and thought-provoking and Shakespearean, right? Like, some things, it's just A plus B equals C, and that's all it is. You get there and you're on to the next thing. And that's perfectly fine. But I think for people who may have a significant amount of weight to lose, 30, 50, 100 plus pounds, I think just having the goal to look a certain way, I think will not necessarily sustain you through your journey. And so I think pursuing health overall, rather than pursuing a certain look, is probably something that will actually have a more beneficial impact on your journey. Setting goals, maybe if you take 3 different blood pressure medications, to get that down to 2, then 1, then none. And surprise, in the process, assuming your root cause for the hypertension had an aspect of obesity with that, you're also going to notice, the side effect of weight loss as well as you're coming off of those medications. So I just think that, and it may be multifaceted, but I think really figuring out what your reasons are beyond just looking a certain way is really going to help you sustain yourself, because once you get to whatever that desired size is, there's always going to be someone at that same size who those jeans fit them just better than they fit you, right? Or you can be the same size, but that top hugs them in the right places better than what it hugs you. And so we really have to get out of the comparison and moving beyond just what someone looks like, and really looking at the overall picture of health and well-being. And like you said, combining the physical, but also with the mental, and realizing that the two can't be separate for long-term health and longevity.
Definitely. And I think I want to end with this. First off, if you want to do part two, we should totally do part two.
Definitely.
But I want to end with this, that there have been things that have gone around social media where people have said mental health is just as important as physical health. And I really want to restate this like I did in the pre-live we did yesterday, that mental health is physical health. The body cannot survive without the mind. And the body and the mind are actually not separate. They're one and the same. The body is the mind and the mind is the body. So what affects one will affect the other as well. So we have to be conscious and aware to understand that we have to take care of both. We cannot compare our health and optimal health journey to someone else's because it's a very individual journey. We cannot take on someone else's journey and try to make it our own, no matter how much we may idolize certain people's bodies or other people's lifestyles or whatever the case may be. This is your journey. Mm-hmm. So if you make your journey, and understand that it's going to come with its own individual set of problems that it may mirror someone else's or not, then you can make that journey be enjoyable and deal with the things that come with it. And I think that's really the most important thing, is make your journey enjoyable for what it is without the comparison of anything else that comes.
Right. No, I think that's very important, because sometimes comparisons, while they can be motivating, can also be a pitfall. So you definitely have to be careful with that. Well,
yes.
So with that, I thank everyone for tuning in. This will be on my stories for 24 hours. And then once the 24 hours are up, Mike, my AV man and husband, will upload this to the website as well. So with that, thank you everyone for tuning in, and you all enjoy your week. Thanks so much.
Have a great evening. My pleasure. Have a great night.
All right, you too. Bye, everyone.
Bye.